The Directorate of Gender Affairs in Antigua and Barbuda presents Women in Politics, promoting the participation of women in politics for good governance and democracy. Women in Politics is supported by the Organization of American States and the Caribbean Institute for Women in Leadership. Women in Antigua and Barbuda have always played an active role in the development of the political landscape. Although not often seen on the political platform, their voices can be heard as they campaigned for their party and candidate. The tipping point came in 2004. A wind of change blew through the country. Jackie Quinn Leandrew, Gail Christian, Joanne Messiah, and Samantha Marshall. These women, young and passionate, challenged stereotypical views that women could not manage the cut and thrust of the political arena. Jackie Quinn Leandrew became the first woman to be elected to the lower house as a member of parliament. Joanne Messiah has moved from party worker to Minister of State in the Ministry of Legal Affairs. Gail Christian, with 2 election campaigns behind her, is the minority leader in the Senate. Samantha Marshall's rise is mainly due to her work ethic and belief that it cannot be politics as usual. These 4 women, although differing in political views, share mutual respect for each other. They are all pioneers who recognize that there is still a lot of work to be done.
I was very much involved in debating. I enjoyed hearing about cases. I couldn't go to court and observe cases because of my age. But I used to hear about lawyers and these cases that they were doing in court, and I had a great interest in it. My brother, when he came out and started practicing, I began to work part-time in his offices, and I got to know a little more of what law was about. And I truly enjoyed it. And I didn't know how to tell my parents that I didn't have any desire to do or follow through with any of their dreams. And what I did, I had a very dear friend who was studying law in England. And I said to her, could you please do me a favor and get me the application form for law school? And she said, sure, I'll do it. And then it required me to send up a deposit for the tuition. I couldn't tell my parents, and I didn't want to discuss it with my brother because I'm sure he would have told them. And I said, you think your mom would pay it for me? She said, sure. Which was done. And when I got the acceptance and I had finished A-levels, my family called a meeting and said, okay, so what is it you're going to do now? And I said, well, here is my acceptance letter for Holborn Law Tutors. I would like to go there, and I'm hoping that the family will be able to assist me.
I think I was perhaps 13 or 14, and the father of the nation, the Honorable Dr. V.C. Bird, organized a Caribbean youth conference, and I was selected by the Antigua Girls High School to attend that. And I think that sort of fueled even more something that I had nurtured since a child. And so that was my first real exposure to the Antigua Labour Party and being involved in the political process. Even before then, my uncle, D.C. Christian, sat as representative for the St. John's Rural West constituency, I think for perhaps 2 or 3 successive terms. I like to say to people when I speak to them about my political career or how I got involved in it, that I would walk the streets of Grace Farm with my dad, who was really active in Uncle DC's campaign. And I remember putting up posters even at age 4 or 5 with him. I remember the rush I got, the excitement from simply distributing campaign paraphernalia, because of course they would congregate at my uncle's house and we were next door neighbors. And everything was then. I remember an early slogan of the Antigua Labour Party, ain't no stopping us now, we're on the move. And so, I mean, I've just had that bubble, that excitement for politics. Clearly, a little girl's dream of what politics is, and actually being involved in politics, it's just not necessarily the same. I mean, the reality of politics isn't what I would have cultivated as a child, you know, that dream that I had. I do not regret it for one moment.
There were 3 things that I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to become an attorney. I wanted to have a stint in politics. And I've always said I want to end my career teaching at a university where I have the opportunity to mold young minds and to interact with young people and help them to understand the tremendous responsibility they have as the vanguards, if you will, of the future. So my interest was piqued perhaps during my early teens. Yes. And then when I went off to university, I became quickly involved in the Student Government Association and had an idea, or got exposed, I should say, to governance at a different level, at an administrative level, but at a level where we were responsible for representing the views and the opinions of the student body to the administration on a wide variety of issues. And so I think I got a good exposure as to, you know, what was involved in politics. And of course, growing up in Antigua Barbuda, as a young person, being concerned about the issues of the then day, I was always very concerned that I grew up without a functioning library. My parents were educators, and so books were critical to our everyday existence and, you know, the whole ability to research. And I was very concerned about that. And of course, you know, my parents would have friends over, or my father in particular would go visit his friends, and I was like his tag-along. And so I got exposed to those types of discussions, not just politics, but economics and philosophy and things that men of that era found interest in, not simply at the local level, but a lot of it at the international level.
I never ever thought that I would get into politics. I mean, politics was not something I even dreamed of, even considered to get into when I left State College. I went into the media and worked in the media for many years and liked it because I liked communications. I liked, you know, being involved with camera work, informing and educating people. And that was the career that I saw myself in. Eventually, I thought I'd branch off into law. I did have an appreciation and a love for law. But sometimes your calling comes in many different ways. I started going around United Progressive Party. I was very active in the St. George's branch. They were looking for a candidate at the time. I was actually just completing my PhD and had come home a summer, did some work in the branch, and had gone back to Canada when I got a call from Harold Lovell. He put me on a three-way call to the Prime Minister, the Honorable Baldwin Spencer, then leader of the opposition, and they popped the question, you know, would you be interested in running in one of our constituencies? And I didn't give them an answer right away. In fact, I was not a party member at the time, even though I was an avid supporter. And I think Honorable Harold Lovell, he reminds me all the time that, you know, I paid your first set of dues. You know, you were in Canada and I paid that $30 for you. And so, you know, he really initiated me into politics.
I think my mother probably thought, oh my goodness, politics again? But no, seriously, my mom gave me the support. She said, the decision is yours. I cannot tell you yes or no. I can only tell you that be honest with people, you know, keep the values. She says, people say that politicians are not good. She says, it's people. And if you're a good person and you're willing to do good, let people see that. And she says, remember, not because you may be rejected the first time means that you don't try again. If you're serious about this, make up your mind.
My dad, call him my strength, if you will. I think also that I'm told, not by him of course, but by others, that there was much hope and desire for him to run in the constituency. And I think it was perhaps when he decided not to that my uncle moved forward. So I don't know if my dad was living vicariously through me, but he has been really my strength and my rock. There are times I'm thinking, oh gosh, I'm not going to get this done. And he's saying, listen, you have to go out, you have to do this. Yeah. You know, he has really just been the spirit.
I, figured there may have been consequences. Some of my extended family, they were concerned. I think my parents were also concerned that, there's a time to be outspoken and there's a time to be silent, But I just decided, I'm doing this, and I'll just take whatever the consequences are, because I think in life, we all have a responsibility to stand up for something, whatever that something is. It doesn't have to be anything political, it could be social, it could be religious. It could just be within your community. Just stand up for something.
During that time of agitation and discussion, there was a lot of talking, a lot of conversation, a lot of pros and cons being thrown back and forth with my family members, with my close circuit of friends. What if? Should I? Is this possible? There hadn't been any women on the any of the political parties or independents who had been able to make any serious inroads.
The Honorable Jackie Quinley Andrew was the first woman elected to politics. And I think that, in fact, she has assisted in paving the way for other women to enter the political arena. I would hope that more young women, as well as young men, would enter the political arena. The support is there from the party on a whole. Unfortunately, where you may find that the women within the parties, and when I say the women, I mean the supporters on a whole, come out and support and fight for the men, you don't necessarily get that sense. Well, for me, I would say as a woman, yes, they come out, they fight, but they go sometimes the extra length for the men.
Imagine, if you will, a 28-year-old female running against a veteran politician who is the leader, or who was the leader of the opposition at the time. That itself was not easy, but I've often said to individuals that my focus was never really so much the person I was contesting against, but rather a deep-seated desire to see the St. John's Rural West constituency move to the helm of progress and development in Antigua and Barbuda. I don't think that anyone can deny that that community, perhaps our community, my community, is faced with a lot of challenges. Yet I consider it to be the repository of everything that is also good of Antigua and Barbuda. It has produced sportsmen, it has produced educators. And I just still want to see it taken in a different direction. And I think that is what continues to fuel my passion.
I didn't necessarily think that my age would get in the way. I thought my gender might present some challenges, simply because while there had been women who had run on political platforms in the past, we live in such a male-centric society where there are too many people who still think that women have their places in the house. And I remember the Directorate of Gender Affairs had a tagline for one of their programs that said, a woman's place is in the house, and 3 ellipses of Parliament, you know? And I was very drawn to that. And so it was a concern. And, you know, you test the ground a little, and even in the party itself, men think they have a natural right to rule and to govern. They think they have a natural opening to ascend the political stairway. And so, you know, these are issues that I was concerned about.
I was extremely nervous. But I am a public speaker, so at the first few minutes you are nervous. And I guess the adulation, the applause and the warmth of the crowd, because at that time in 2004, it probably would be more difficult now with all of the changes that have happened, and people have become apathetic, and, you know, people are a bit distant. When you're an incumbent party, lots of things happen, and over time, you know, your reception changes. But in 2003 to 2004, there was just adulation, you know, appreciation, applause. People were happy to see a woman from St. George's, a daughter of New Winthrop soil, coming back and giving back. And so the first time on the platform really was very welcoming.
My team is based on the constituency. Building the campaign was to get up and go into the constituency on a regular daily basis and meet the people and ask for their support. Persons who you know, because I mean, essentially this is party against party. And persons who you know to be supporters of your party. They're not necessarily just going to jump up. And I know a lot of people say, oh, if you're Labour, you UPP. Fact of the matter is you have to go and meet these persons, explain to them and listen to them. You listen to them to hear what are the issues, the burning issues within the community. You also explain to them what it is the policy of the party at this stage, and also what it is you would like to do within the community. After you've worked a program with these individuals, persons easily came on board to be members of the campaign team.
I don't think that there were any specific challenges that I had to overcome because of the name. In fact, the name brought me some measure of credibility, because my uncle was known to be a very humble, very approachable politician, and very honest in all of his dealings. And I also take pride in the fact that I'm also the great niece of Sir Ernest Williams, who served as leader of the opposition whilst the Labour Party was in power, and he's known to be the minister. He was the minister of manners, so to speak. So I like to say that I come from good stock, and I have good people to emulate. You know, my uncle, well, you know, I know him as uncle, knew him as Uncle Dada, his son Rodney Williams, and my uncle DC. And so I am exceedingly proud of their accomplishments and the impression that they would have left on the political landscape in Antigua and Barbuda.
When I started campaigning before I started campaigning, when we would get on the radio and get some exposure from Observer Radio, invariably there would be some man who would call in, usually an older man, based on the sound of the voice and that kind of thing, who would say, you know, woman not to rule anything. No woman must rule any man. And why we just don't stay home and mind our children and take care of your husband and these kinds of things. And I encountered some of that in the campaign as well, even as recent as the last election. There's still men in 2011, in the 21st century, who have these types of archaic views.
I grew a reputation throughout the entire 2003-2004 campaign for dancing. So whenever I got on stage, you know, there was music. It was part of my build-up. It was part of the personality of Jackie Quinn Leandro. They would play Strength of a Woman and all of these wonderful calypsos that the local calypsonians made. And, you know, that would pump me up and, you know, give me the drive and the verve to really deliver.
My son is going to be 10 this October, God's willing. I was appointed to the Senate in 2002, and I remember holding him in my arms at Government House whilst receiving my just after receiving my instruments of appointments. So please appreciate that, you know, we have been in this thing together since he was a baby. I remember also on one occasion the Senate did not adjourn till about 10 o'clock one evening, and I had to leave and journey to my aunt's home to pick him up because I just could not go home without him. And yes, he would have been what, 6-7 months old, and I remember he started crying in the vehicle, and so I had to pull off the street, take him out of his car seat, give him a bottle, and so there we were on the street to 5 Islands alone. And you know, I have managed because I serve such a mighty God. I have managed. It has not been easy at all. There were moments when I felt I should have been there for him, and I wasn't because of commitments, but my dad and my mom, my family, they've all raised Jonathan. Even the community. I mean, there are times when he says, "Mommy, I want to come campaigning with you." Imagine a 3-year-old on a campaign trail. But he's been there. He has also been there for me. And I will tell you this. I recall on one occasion, I was in a hurry to get home, and I normally just drive through Grace Farm to go home because you have an opportunity then to stop and interact with people, say good afternoon. People have an opportunity to see you. And there is this other road, we call it the C road, that leads to 5 Islands, so I can get there in less than no time. And I remember I got to the junction that would take me to Grace Farm or to the C road. I'm thinking, Jonathan, Mom, you need to get home now, but we have a meeting later. And he said, okay, don't blame me if you don't drive through Grace Farm and you don't win the election. Just don't blame me. How do you expect? I'm thinking to myself, okay. He said yes, so I just said, okay, Mom, you go. And you know, he is a wonderful little boy. He understands what I have to go through. There have been times when, you know, it bothered him because he figured he needed his mom at home. You know, it's running from campaigning to a party meeting, or I have to go to court, or, you know, there's always something. So I think he's always felt that he has to compete for my time. But he does realize, however, that he has a very committed mommy.
It's important to have your children understand why you do what you do, why you've chosen this particular career path, why you've chosen to become involved at this level in national affairs. And if you can get them to buy in, then I think it's a little easier and it's a bit better to manage. My children were a little older than some of my colleagues, for example. But I would get them involved at any level, whether it were printing flyers, you know, stuffing envelopes, and particularly in the last election when we all got so high tech and we were doing the Facebook and the YouTube, and, you know, it had a particular IT flair. My children were the most valuable to me. You know, when you have to work the phones, and they're important for campaigning with young people as well. You know, I remember there are times when I would meet and interface with young people. I'd have to ask my children, what's the latest song out there? What is the latest, you know, what should I say? What sounds cool? You know, because you have to be cool with young people. They have to believe that you understand their language, you know, and their style and these sorts of things. So they've been helpful where that is concerned. But they miss you. And you need the support network. You need your friends to pick them up. Perhaps if nobody else is there, you need them to drop them to parties and these sorts of things. And play your role. And when you have time, you have to spend time. I remember my absenteeism, if I may refer to it as that, was brought home to me many years ago when one of my sons, I decided I was taking them to school because my support network would do these things for me, because sometimes I had to leave early at early meetings or whatever. I couldn't afford to be stuck in the traffic. And one of my sons said to me when I said, I'm taking you to school today. And he said, I? Who is I? I said, your mom. He said, well, you look like my mom. You sound like my mom. But my mom never takes me to school, you know? And I thought that was a statement that I needed to listen to.
In my own personal life, I think I probably would have paid more attention to relationships, because politics is a relationship breaker. Whether we want to think, whether we accept it or not, it's a cold, hard fact. It is. And you have to be able to hold on to your significant other. You have to be able to hold on to a relationship, because, as I said to you, people in your constituency sometimes see you as part of their family. And if you don't have a strong partner, it can affect your relationship. It can certainly lead to jealousies and envy and all of the things that destroy relationships. And I mean, I think I've felt the brunt of that kind of thing, the distance that grew within my own relationship with my husband. I can't say ex-husband, I'm separated. I'm not divorced yet, but separated. And, you know, lots of things are created. And I think that to a certain extent, that's why a lot of women don't go into politics. And the women who go into politics, if you look back, if you look at them, certainly in the Caribbean, most of them are single or divorced, unfortunately.
I get up at 5, sometimes before. If Jonathan is with me, sometimes he's at my mom's, sometimes he's not. But if he's with me, get up at 5, make breakfast. He goes to school in Buckley's, and we live in 5 Islands. So we know that is it's a 20-25 minute drive. So I have to get him to school for 8, back down to the office, pick him up at 3:30, drop him off back to the office, homework, and sometimes to meetings. If it's in the thick of a campaign, then somebody will pick him up for me. He'll go to lessons, or I'll do homework with him. We read, go back to a political meeting. And if he's not with me, he's at my mother's house. And sometimes I'll see him the day after. If I have to go to Parliament, he's oftentimes with my mom. And he'll send me a text while Parliament is sitting, saying something cheeky or funny, and saying, you know, hurry up and get home. And you know, that's a typical day. We manage. I have support. I have strong support. So you know, that's my day. Sometimes I'm really very tired, but God's grace sustains me. The role of a senator is simply you're a legislator. So it's simply to debate bills. There is opportunity, however, to put forward, members' bills, private members' bills, and so forth, but basically just to debate the legislation that is put before you, whether to support it or not, but basically just to debate. That is in essence what we do.
Depends on if I have early morning meetings, but typically I will be up maybe around 4:45 because I have to exercise. It's important to exercise. It keeps you level, it keeps the body in equilibrium, and it's a great stress buster. So I get up early to exercise. My children are older, so if they're not here in Antigua, I just have me to worry about. But if they're here, although they're older, I make sure I do the mommy things. So I will get up and I'll prepare maybe lunch ahead of time or dinner ahead of time. Not every day, but I'll do that. And then if school is in session, I have to leave early to beat the traffic. When I was Minister of Agriculture, my day sometimes would start as early as 4 o'clock. Because if you're trying to meet farmers in the field, then that's the time you've got to be there. But typically, I would get to the office maybe anywhere between 7:45 and 8:30. And this really depends on the traffic. And so you have meetings, some scheduled, some unscheduled. And then you have your regular work to do. You have lots and lots of meetings, and then you see people. Most times, it's a bad thing, I forget to have lunch. But I always have a healthy breakfast. I have to have breakfast. And typically, if I have a good breakfast, I can skip lunch. And then sometimes there are more meetings in the evenings, almost 4 to 5 times in the week. And then there are Saturday meetings and Sunday meetings as well. And so there's seldom a day off.
I get up at about 4 o'clock in the morning. I have a small, I wouldn't call it a breakfast. I have something like a small bowl of oats. And then I'm at the gym at 5. I usually like to have some carbs before I go into the gym. I'm at the gym at 5, back at 6, and getting the kids ready for school. I take them to school. I could have a driver take them, but I prefer to take them because it is that commute to school, unfortunately, that we do get a lot of conversations in. I always make sure I sit down and have breakfast with them every morning. So we talk a lot at breakfast time, and we talk on the commute to school. Then it's at the office by 8:15, and the day is packed with meetings, appointments. Might be cabinet or parliament, but usually lots of meetings, back-to-back meetings and appointments. And that goes on until pretty much 5 o'clock, 4:30, 5 o'clock, and then it's home. I try to get home around 5:30 so that I can spend some time with the kids again, making sure that homework is done. And that's the problem too with women. Let's not say it's a problem. That is one of the concerns why there are so few women going into politics, especially if you have a family, because your time, the time that you spend with family, it's very limited. My kids have understood, they've grown to understand that mornings and evenings, that's their time. And lots of times the days can be long. For instance, if there's cabinet, if there's parliament, it can go right down until 10 o'clock, sometimes midnight. So sometimes I don't see them until the next day. It's pretty much a long day. Sometimes I try to squeeze in 25 or 26 hours into a 24-hour day.
I think the main challenge that I had is that I was coming up against a candidate who was well known, and he himself was actually from the area. Persons have already developed a bond with the individual, and so it's hard sometimes to really look beyond that bond to see what the other person may have to offer.
I recall even last election, I was asked to consider whether I would move from the constituency that I was in to one that the party felt I would win easily. I refused. I am from the St. John's Rural West constituency, and until the party branch feels that I can't carry the message, I will offer myself in that constituency. So it has not been my experience in the Labour Party, certainly, that women are in any way marginalized or put in seats that it is known they can't win and they're put there just because of women. In fact, I consider my male counterparts to be terribly supportive.
We are socialized to believe that women can fix everything. And if there's a problem, you know, whatever the problem is, that, you know, you will find the solution. And there are people who, you know, it's all about them. And they just want you to fix their problem. And there is no empathy for you. There is no sympathy for the things you have to do. You know, if you get 3 hours sleep for 2 weeks, that's not their problem. And they just want you to address their problems. But so there's that, but I think that goes for men and women as well in politics, where people are narrow-minded and singularly focused on them.
It's a tough transition because you're going from ordinary Jane Blow to becoming a politician, someone that is seen as a mediator, someone who is seen as a representative, someone who is seen as a servant of the people, someone who is seen as mother, father, counselor, you know, everything wrapped up in one. And if you're not careful, it can be extremely stressful, because people in small island states see politicians as their thing, their person, and everybody, there's a deluge of requests, concerns, complaints, love, hate, everything is thrown at you. And if you're not careful, you can lose yourself in it.
I can't say that as a woman I bring anything necessarily different. Unfortunately, I don't distinguish myself because I'm a woman. I look at myself as a candidate. And there are things within the community that I look at, the constituency, issues that I think need to be addressed. And I don't address them as a woman, I address them as a candidate. I'm not gonna say that I'm riding on the skirt tail of being a woman and entering. I don't expect anyone to be sympathetic to me because of that. However, I find that as a female candidate, I have to put in more work.
I don't know if women bring something to politics that men don't. There is not enough empirical evidence, at least in my society, for me to come to that conclusion. I think that any politician must be selfless, must be honest, and must have some measure of integrity. I think what we need to do is to raise the level of our electoral discourse, whether we are men or women. As I said earlier, I don't know that I've faced any specific challenge because I'm a woman. I know, of course, when I attended my first cabinet meeting, whilst the Labour Party was in power, I was in fact the only female in the room, but it then teaches you to step up.
When you look at organizations that are not necessarily political, with women at the helm, they tend to do better. Because women, I think, are more empathetic, more thoughtful, more holistic, more rounded in our approach to challenges. And I think that is something that has been proven by the social scientists where they say that men are lineal thinkers. And there's nothing wrong with being a lineal thinker. But I think if you are looking at a family or a society, you've got to examine all sides. You've got to have the ability to multitask.
As a woman politician, and I sometimes ask my colleagues, you know, do you get the same kinds of requests that we get? Yes, you get the requests for money and for material things and that sort of thing. But do you also have to give a bit of yourself? Do you also have to sit and listen to a couple tearing into each other? Do you have to sit and counsel a teenage child who is going through, you know, a drug problem? Do you have to sit and listen to a young girl who is trying to keep a pregnancy from her mother, and the mother is your constituent? How do you handle these sorts of problems? And it's just always coming at you. The other problem I find is that the corporate community have for many years looked to men, maybe because we are a patriarchal, traditional society, and politics has been a male-centric profession. The corporate community look to men when they are thinking of funding and financing political campaigns. And even when you have women on the political party ticket, and you check behind the scenes, the kinds of funding and the kinds of resources that are given to male candidates, it far outstrips the kind of resources and funding that the female candidates get. So we have to work twice as hard with fewer resources to get the same job done.
There are so many I admire, because as a young child growing up, I remember Dame Eugenia Charles being the first female prime minister within our region. And I have to say, I think that I'm stuck in that age. When I think of politicians, you think of someone like her, who stood up despite all the challenges around her. She stood the course. Some may not like her style of politics, but I assume she did what she thought was best then. For me, that is the sort of thing. Persons may not like my style, but I would hope that I'm doing what I consider, and when I can sleep at night and say, I did my best.
I don't just admire, believe this, I don't just admire female politicians. I love to see E. Ann Henry, who's a solicitor, attorney at law. I love to see her in action. I mean, I think she'd make an excellent politician. I admire Dame Bernice Lake. I mean, I've watched the way these women conduct themselves in court. They're attorneys, but I think they're such powerful women. At this conference I attended recently, I had an opportunity to listen to Mia Motley, and I was in complete awe. And I remember she was speaking, and I think she probably had her phone. Perhaps she had made a few notes or something, but she spoke, and I thought, my God, will I ever be able to articulate the way she's doing it? And just at that moment, she said, I've been in this for a long time. This didn't come overnight. And, you know, that gave me hope.
The politician of the 20th century that I most admire is Fidel Castro. I like his passion. I think I understand his vision. And sometimes, a lot of times, politicians, generally speaking, leaders in particular, are misunderstood. And I think it was 2001. Yes, I think it was 2001. I had the opportunity to visit Cuba on an opposition delegation at the invitation of the Cuban government. And talk about culture shock when I arrived in Cuba. because my impression of Cuba had been totally 100% Western fed. And so I had a perception, I mean, I read about Fidel Castro, but you read about it, you hear about Cuba, but when you have all this Western information just coming at you all the time, it's hard to reconcile both. And when I got to Cuba, I just thought I was in any cosmopolitan city that had not been well looked after. But by that time, the Soviet Union was no more. And so I could only imagine that when they had had that type of support, it probably rivaled London, Washington, D.C., New York City, Miami, Paris, any such city.
I admire Dame Eugenia Charles. I think her strength. I admired her strength, her ability to decipher what was right for the people of Dominica, to dismiss what was nonsense, and to be able to walk boldly into a room and to make a decision without flip-flopping. I like that about her. And you know, even her moniker, the Iron Lady, I like the fact that I always, even when I pray, you know, I say, Lord, make me be able to make decisions and to be tough, and to, when I take a stance, to stand by whatever stance I've taken. And that is one of the things about politics. You must be able to stand up and say, this is what I'm going to do, and stand by it, rather than wavering. I also admire Billy Miller in Barbados, and Mia Motley in Barbados as well. Further afield, I liked Margaret Thatcher, again for her strength. Not necessarily for the policies that she implemented, but because of the strength of character and the strength of purpose. And whenever I leave politics, I want to be able to, people to be able to say, you know, whenever she took a decision, that was the decision, that was the path that she would go down. And that the determination to do right by the people of Antigua and Barbuda, that was always my guiding policy.
Politics isn't beyond anyone. It's not beyond anyone. I think a few years ago there was a young lady from St. Lucia who had just basically come out of school, and she ran. And she was successful in winning. I think when she served as a minister, she was about 22, 23. That was quite a few years ago, because I was in university then. You look at that, politics is not beyond anyone. The thing is, you have to honestly want to do good. You have to know the people. And as I said before, you have to listen.
I would say to her, simply go for it. But I would obviously go through with her. For instance, when I ran on the Labour Party ticket, I was the only female. So when Samantha came on board, and even Alincia and Jackie, because we dialogued about it, Samantha actually came to the office. We sat in this office and we spoke about it. And I said, this has to be about you and not the fulfillment of anything anyone else expects of you. This has to be about you. You've got to understand that the long hours that you must put in, you must understand that people can be so kind, but they can be so unforgiving.
Politics is a calling. That's how I see it. You have to have a passion to serve, And service is a very broad spectrum. You have to have a genuine love for people. You have to have an obsession with changing the lives and the livelihoods of people. You have to have a vision. It's not about you. It's never about you.
One has to be able to decipher what is constructive criticism. And I learned this from Mia Motley. She came to Antigua very early in our administration and ran a seminar with us, and just went through as new politicians facing a tough opposition who they were rabid. They were extremely unhappy to have lost the election. And so they had given us 6 months in office, and they'd given us a year, and then after a year passed, they'd given us 2 years, and so on and so forth. And one-term government. And then after we won the second term, of course, that changed and so on. And she had said to us, one of the things that you have to be able to do is to decipher what is constructive criticism. What is it that you can learn from people who really in Antigua who have an interest in seeing good, justice for the country, and who would be interested in seeing the development of Antigua and Barbuda. If you can decipher what is really just political posturing, what is pandering, what is just destructive criticism, and then pick from that what can help you to build. I think that Antiguans and Barbudans are now open to female candidates on the ticket. I think the people of St. George's certainly have led the way in terms of saying to the nation, it's not about whether you wear pants or skirt. It is about who is competent, who can best stand up in Parliament or stand up anywhere in the world and represent someone from Pigots or Potters or New Winthrops. That is what is important. And they looked past gender and decided the time had come. The time had come for Antiguans to elect the most competent person. Not necessarily, I don't even like to say a woman. The most competent person on the ticket. And if tomorrow, if in 2014, the most competent person is a man, then vote her out. And that is the bottom line. In politics, it shouldn't be whether it's a man or a woman. It should be who is best able to represent me.
Women in Politics is supported by the Organization of American States and the Caribbean Institute for Women in Leadership.